The scent of lilies and stale grief clung to me like a shroud. I stared at the closed pine box, the cheapest one they had, and whispered, "I'm so sorry, Leo." My voice cracked on his name. Leo Welch, my husband. Gone at 33, just 2 years older than my own 31. It felt like a lifetime ago that we'd laughed in our tiny apartment, planning a future that now lay buried with him. The funeral director, a man with a perpetually sympathetic frown, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Welch? We're ready to finalise the arrangements." Every head in the small chapel turned to me. Leo's mother, Mary, a woman of 62 whose face was a roadmap of disapproval, fixed me with a stare that could curdle milk. She always looked at me like I was a stain on her pristine carpet, even when Leo was alive. Her son, Logan, 35, Leo's older brother, and the self-appointed patriarch of their dwindling fortune, stood beside her, his arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. His wife, Olivia, 34, was beside him, clutching a designer handbag like a shield. Haley, Leo's younger sister, 28, and perpetually glued to her phone, barely looked up. "Payment, Mrs. Welch?" the director prompted again, his voice softer this time, sensing the tension. My throat was dry. I had a wad of crumpled bills in my pocket. $12. That was it. $12 to my name after everything. After the hospital bills, after the lost wages, after trying to keep our heads above water. Leo had been the steady earner, the one who kept our little world spinning. Without him, it had all unraveled, faster than a cheap sweater. Mary stepped forward, her voice cutting through the hushed chapel like a razor. "Honestly, Cameron, it's a shame. You should have married someone with more foresight, someone richer perhaps, who could actually afford to bury their husband properly." Logan let out a low chuckle, a sound that grated on my raw nerves. Haley finally looked up, a flicker of something that might have been pity or maybe just mild amusement in her eyes. The humiliation burned, a hot, searing flush that started in my chest and spread to my face. My own parents, who were sitting in the second row, offered no defence. My mother, 58, wrung her hands. My father, 60, stared at the floor. Later, they'd pull me aside, offering their usual brand of support. "It's time you came home, Cameron," my mom would say, her voice dripping with pity. "Start over. We'll help you get back on your feet." "You need stability," my dad would add, as if I hadn't been stable with Leo, as if my life hadn't been perfectly fine until it shattered. I didn't need their pity. I didn't need their criticism. I needed Leo, and he was gone. I looked at the director, then back at Mary, her face a mask of smug satisfaction. "I'll handle it," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but firm. I didn't say how. I couldn't. I turned on my heel, ignoring the whispers, the stares, the judgment. My backpack, heavy with the few clothes I owned, felt like a lead weight on my shoulders. I walked out of that chapel, past the wilting lilies, past the empty promises of comfort, and into the harsh afternoon sun. My Honda Civic, a beat-up relic Leo had lovingly maintained, sat baking in the parking lot. The engine coughed to life, protesting, but it started. I put it in drive, not looking back. Not at the chapel, not at the people who had just buried the kindest man I knew, and then buried me with him. I drove until the city lights blurred into a distant glow. I drove until the gaslight flickered on. I pulled into the back corner of an Exxon station, the hum of the refrigerators inside the convenience store a low thrum against the silence of my despair. I reclined the seat, pulling my worn jacket tighter around me. The $12 felt like a curse in my pocket. I slept in that car, behind an Exxon station, the smell of exhaust and cheap coffee filling the night air. And as the first hint of dawn painted the sky, I swore on Leo's name I'd never need them again. Not his family, not mine. Not anyone. The $12 lasted exactly 2 days. 2 days of gas station coffee and the cheapest instant noodles I could find. After that, the Honda became my entire world. My home, my office, my sanctuary. I parked in different spots each night. Walmart parking lots, quiet residential streets, sometimes even just a dark stretch of road near a closed business. Always with one eye open, always with a knot of fear in my stomach. My days became a routine born of necessity. Mornings, I'd drive to a public library. They had free Wi-Fi, warm bathrooms, and a quiet corner where I could blend in. I'd spend hours there, hunched over my ancient laptop, the one Leo had bought me for my last birthday. I wasn't looking for jobs, not at first. I was just trying to distract myself, to escape the crushing weight of grief and humiliation. One afternoon, I stumbled onto a YouTube channel. It was some guy, probably in his early 20s, meticulously disassembling a smartphone. He talked about logic boards, capacitors, and micro-soldering with an almost religious fervor. I watched, mesmerized. It was like watching a surgeon or an artist. Something clicked. I'd always been good with my hands, always enjoyed taking things apart to see how they worked. Leo used to joke I had X-ray vision for electronics. I started watching more videos, laptop repairs, tablet fixes, even obscure console modifications. I'd pick up discarded electronics from dumpsters behind repair shops or sometimes just off the side of the road, old broken phones, cracked tablets. I'd bring them back to my car, use a cheap toolkit I bought with my last few dollars, and try to replicate what I saw online. My fingers, surprisingly steady, learned the delicate dance of tiny screws and ribbon cables. I was a natural. The focus it required, the intricate problem solving, it was the only time my mind wasn't consumed by Leo, or Mary's sneer, or the hollow ache in my chest. A month bled into 2. I was still living in the Honda, still showering at truck stops, or the occasional gym day pass I splurged on, but now I was good, really good. I could diagnose a dead motherboard just by looking at the schematics online. I could replace a charging port blindfolded. I started lurking in obscure online forums, places where people talked about custom builds, data recovery, and repairs that big box stores wouldn't touch. My handle was Cameron R, innocuous enough. I'd offer advice, sometimes even solve complex problems for strangers, just for the challenge. One evening, a private message popped up from a user named Byte King. "Hey Cameron R," it read. "Saw your posts on the Deadboard Revival thread. You seem to know your stuff. Got a job for you, if you're interested. High risk, high reward. Cash." I hesitated. This was different. This was real money. I was still 31, still living out of my car, and winter was coming. I needed this. "Details?" I typed back. Byte King, who later introduced himself as Brian Carter, 38, was an online tech dealer. He bought and sold rare components, salvaged parts, and sometimes entire systems. He was gruff, no nonsense, but he seemed to have a strange code of honor. He sent me a photo of a phone motherboard. It looked like it had been run over by a truck, then set on fire. "Client dropped it in a river, then tried to dry it in an oven," Brian explained in a follow-up message. "Data recovery is critical. No one else will touch it. Think you can do it?" I stared at the image. It was a mess. But I saw a path. A tiny, almost invisible path through the charred circuitry. "Send it," I replied. He shipped it to a P.O. box I'd rented. I worked on that board for 3 days straight, fueled by cheap coffee and a burning need to prove myself. My Honda became a makeshift lab, my headlamp illuminating the tiny components as I painstakingly cleaned, resoldered, and rebuilt. When I finally hooked it up to my testing rig, the data flickered to life. Success, my first real win. Brian paid me more than I'd seen in months. Enough for a proper meal, a full tank of gas, and a few more tools. He was impressed. "You're good, Cameron R." "Really good. Ever thought about going pro?" Anonymously, of course. There's a market for ghosts like you. That's how Vexa was born. I created a new online identity, a new persona. No photos, no personal details. Just a reputation for being the best. The one who could fix anything, recover anything, bypass anything. Vexa became known in the dark corners of the internet, a whisper among those who needed things done quietly, efficiently, and without questions. My skills grew, my confidence soared. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building something. One night, scrolling through a secure forum where Vexa was gaining serious traction, I saw a new thread. Project Red Tears. It was a request for a highly skilled, untraceable tech expert to analyze and potentially disable a corrupted surveillance system. The post was vague, but one detail caught my eye. It mentioned a colonial estate recently sold. My blood ran cold. The Welch home. It couldn't be a coincidence, could it? Months turned into a blur of late nights and early mornings. It had been almost 6 months since Leo's funeral. I was still living in my Honda, but it wasn't out of desperation anymore. It was a choice. Every dollar Vexa earned, and Vexa was earning a lot, went into a separate account. I was building a war chest, a quiet digital fortress of funds. My Honda was just a temporary base of operations, a mobile command center. I'd park it in quiet, unassuming neighborhoods, blend in, and work. My skills as Vexa had exploded. Brian, 38, my first real contact in this underground world, had become an invaluable mentor. He'd send me the impossible jobs, the ones no one else could touch, untraceable data wipes, ghost network setups, forensic recovery from devices that had been through hell and back. My reputation grew, whispered in encrypted chats and dark web forums. Vexa was the one you called when you needed something done that couldn't be traced, couldn't be undone. The Project Red Tears request from the secure forum had gnawed at me. A corrupted surveillance system, a colonial estate. It was too specific, too close to home. I took the job not for the money but for the information. The client was anonymous, only communicating through encrypted channels, but their request was clear. Analyze the system, find its vulnerabilities, and if possible, find out who installed it and why it was failing. As Vexa, I started digging. My initial research into the surveillance system led me down a rabbit hole of property records and public filings. That's when I saw it. The address. The Welch family's colonial home. The same house where Mary had hosted countless condescending family dinners. The same house where Logan, 35, had once told Leo, 33, he was punching above his weight, marrying me. And then, the bombshell, the house was listed for sale. Not just listed, but marked urgent sale, cash buyers preferred. My fingers flew across the keyboard. This wasn't just a coincidence, it was a sign. I dug deeper, using every trick Vexa had learned. Public records, obscure financial databases, even some old social media profiles I knew Logan, 35, and Olivia, 34, had used. It wasn't hard to piece together. Logan, the arrogant financial guru of the Welch family, had made a disastrous crypto investment. He'd leveraged their family trust, the one Mary, 62, guarded like a dragon, and it had imploded. The house, their prized possession, was the collateral. A cold, hard resolve settled in my gut. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about something else, something I hadn't dared to name. I needed more information, local intel that even Vexa's digital prowess couldn't easily access. That's when I thought of Kyson Lee, 29. He was the only friend who'd stuck by me through my early 20s, before Leo. He worked in local government, something with city planning and permits. He was always in the know about local happenings, especially property. It took me a few days to work up the courage to reach out. I sent him a message on an old, rarely used social media account, careful not to reveal my current situation. Hey Kyson, long time. Random question, you still in the loop on city property auctions? His reply came surprisingly fast. Cam? Wow. Yeah, still am. Why? You looking to buy a fixer-upper? I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Something like that. Need some info on how the process works, maybe some upcoming listings. He was curious, but loyal. He didn't ask too many questions, just offered to meet for coffee. I declined, citing a busy schedule, and asked him to just email me anything he found. He sent me links to city auction sites, tips on how to navigate the bidding process, and even a few off-market listings. He had no idea what he was helping me with. My confidence, once shattered, was now a sharp, gleaming edge. The obsession grew, a quiet hum beneath my skin. I wasn't just fixing electronics anymore. I was fixing my life. And I was going to do it by dismantling theirs. The open house for the Welch estate was on a Saturday afternoon. I'd spent weeks preparing. My hair, once a dull brown, was now a sleek, dark auburn, a wig I'd bought with cash from a beauty supply store miles away. I wore a tailored blazer and slacks, a sharp, professional look that screamed investor, not widow living in a Honda. I even had a set of fake business cards with a generic company name and a burner phone number. I walked into the grand foyer of the Welch home, the scent of lemon polish and old money thick in the air. It was exactly as I remembered it. Every ornate detail a reminder of the life Leo had tried to bridge between us and his family. Mary, 62, stood by the fireplace, talking to a real estate agent, her face etched with a familiar, weary disdain. Logan, 35, was on his phone, looking bored. Haley, 28, was nowhere in sight. I moved through the house, nodding politely at other potential buyers, my eyes scanning every corner. The surveillance system I'd been researching as Vexa, Project Red Tears, was humming quietly in the background, its cameras discreetly placed. It was all real. This was it. As I approached Mary and the agent, she looked up, her eyes sweeping over me without a flicker of recognition. I was a stranger, just another potential buyer. We're looking for serious offers, Mary announced, her voice tight with a desperation she tried to hide. Cash buyers only, ideally. We need to close quickly. I met her gaze, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. Perfect, I replied, my voice calm, steady, and utterly unrecognizable. The closing was surprisingly swift, almost clinical. I sat across from Mary, 62, and Logan, 35, in a sterile conference room at the title company. They didn't look at me, not really. They looked through me, seeing only the large sum of money I was about to transfer. They were desperate, and I was their solution. I was still 31, but the woman who walked into that room was a world away from the broken widow who had left Leo's funeral with $12. I had used a shell corporation, set up meticulously by Brian, 38, to handle the transaction. It was completely untraceable back to me. The funds were clean, earned through months of Vex's high-stakes, high-reward work. Every single dollar was a testament to my grit, to the transformation I'd undergone. Mary signed the papers with a flourish, a tight, almost triumphant smile on her lips. Logan, ever the businessman, watched the digital transfer on his phone, his eyes widening slightly as the numbers confirmed the incoming funds. They thought they were getting out of a bind, getting a fresh start. They had no idea they were signing their own eviction notice. Pleasure doing business with you, Ms. Smith, Mary said, extending a hand. I shook it, her grip surprisingly weak. My fake name, Sarah Smith, felt like a shield. Likewise, I replied, my voice calm, betraying nothing. I walked out of that office building feeling a strange mix of exhilaration and emptiness. The house was mine. The very place where I had been humiliated, where Leo, 33, had tried so hard to make me feel accepted by his family, was now under my control. It was a victory, but it felt cold, precise. Not the catharsis I might have expected. Weeks later, I sat in a small, unassuming cafe across the street from the Welch home. My Honda was parked a few blocks away, out of sight. I had on a simple baseball cap and sunglasses, just another face in the crowd. The eviction notice had been served a week prior, delivered by a process server who had no idea the new owner was watching from afar. The moving truck pulled up just after 9 a.m. It was an old, beat-up thing, a stark contrast to the pristine colonial Mary, 62, had always maintained. I watched as two burly movers began to carry out boxes. First, a stack of framed family photos, then a large ornate mirror, then a box clearly labelled China. Mary's prized, decade-old china, the set she'd always boasted about. The one she'd once told me was too delicate for clumsy hands. I sipped my lukewarm coffee, a faint smile touching my lips. This was it. The first tangible consequence. Mary, Logan, 35, and Olivia, 34, were there, directing the movers, their faces a mixture of frustration and disbelief. Logan was on his phone, probably yelling at someone. Olivia looked stressed, her usually perfect hair slightly disheveled. Haley, 28, was nowhere to be seen, which wasn't surprising. She was always good at disappearing when things got messy. I watched them, a detached observer. There was no grand confrontation, no dramatic reveal. Just the quiet, methodical removal of their possessions from a home that was no longer theirs. It was a silent takedown, exactly as I had planned. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. They had no idea who Sarah Smith was, no idea that the woman who had bought their house for cash was the same woman they had left to bury her husband with $12. A pang of something, not guilt, but a deep, complex ache, twisted in my stomach. Would Leo have wanted this? Would he have approved of this cold, calculated revenge? He was a kind man, a gentle soul. He wouldn't have wished this on anyone. But then, he hadn't been there when his mother mocked me, when his brother chuckled, when my own family offered only pity. He hadn't been there to see me sleep in my car, to feel the gnawing hunger, the crushing loneliness. This wasn't just about the house. It was about reclaiming something they had taken from me, my dignity. As the movers loaded the last box of china, Mary stumbled slightly, catching herself on the doorframe. She looked around, her eyes lingering on the empty windows, the stripped bare porch. For a fleeting moment, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't anger or disdain, but genuine loss. It was a flicker, gone as quickly as it appeared. I finished my coffee, the taste bitter on my tongue. The revenge was taking shape, a slow, methodical unraveling. This was just the beginning. Later that night, as I was parked in a quiet cul-de-sac reviewing my Vexa notes, my burner phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. Silence. Then a text message came through, just one word. You? My blood ran cold. The number wasn't in my contacts. It was from Haley, 28. How? How could she possibly know? The deed was in the Shell Corporation's name. I had been so careful. I stared at the single word, my heart pounding. She had found something. She had seen something. This wasn't just a silent takedown anymore. This was a direct hit. The single word, you, burned on my phone screen. Haley. How? I hadn't used my real name anywhere, not even on the burner phone. The Shell Corporation was watertight. My mind raced, replaying every step of the purchase, every interaction. I didn't reply. Instead, I immediately sent a message to Brian, 38. Need you to run a deep dive on a phone number. See if it's connected to anyone in the Welch family, and check for any digital footprints related to the sale of the house. Brian's response was quick. On it. Give me an hour. While I waited, I started drilling deeper into the Welch family's digital footprint, focusing on the house itself. As Vexa, I'd already analysed the Project Red Tears surveillance system that had been installed there. It was a high-end, custom setup designed for serious security. But it had strange redundancies, odd blind spots. Now, with the house under my control, I had direct access. I connected to the system remotely, bypassing its security protocols with ease. What I found was a goldmine. Not just surveillance logs, but old tax records that had been digitally stored on the system's server, intermingled with maintenance reports and security overruns. Logan, 35, had been sloppy. He'd used the house's server as a catch-all for everything, probably thinking it was secure enough. I started sifting through the files, my fingers flying across the keyboard. The surveillance logs were extensive, showing every entry and exit, every movement within the house. But it was the maintenance reports that caught my eye, specifically a series of reports from the factory where Leo, 33, had worked. They detailed a history of failed safety protocols, ignored warnings, and a pattern of cutting corners on equipment maintenance. The dates of these reports were chillingly close to Leo's accident. My stomach clenched. Leo had been a blue-collar worker, a good man who believed in doing things by the book. He'd complained sometimes about the safety standards at the plant, but he'd never gone into detail. Now I was seeing why. The reports painted a picture of systemic negligence. And Logan, as the family's financial overseer, had been the one signing off on the budget cuts that led to these ignored protocols. It wasn't just an accident, it was a cover-up. Then I found it, a digital copy of a life insurance policy taken out on Leo Welch, the policyholder, Mary Welch, 62. The amount was substantial, and the date it was taken out? 1 week before Leo's accident. Suspicion, cold and sharp, took root in my mind. This wasn't just about humiliation anymore. This was about something far darker. My rage, which had been a slow burn, now flared into a roaring inferno. It wasn't just Logan's arrogance or Mary's cruelty. It was their potential complicity in Leo's death. Brian's message came through. Haley Welch. Her phone number is linked to an old family account that had access to the digital log for the property deed. Looks like she found a backdoor into the public record system. Smart kid. Haley. Of course. She was always the quiet one, the one everyone underestimated. She must have seen my actual name on the deed's digital log before the Shell Corporation fully obscured it, or maybe she had some obscure tech trick of her own. She was 28, young enough to be digitally savvy. I still didn't reply to her text. My focus had shifted. The revenge was no longer just about humiliation. It was about justice. Leo's justice. I continued digging, fueled by a grim determination. The Project Red Tears system, which I now knew was the Welch family's own security, became my primary target. I found more than just financial documents. I found communication logs, encrypted messages between Logan and Mary, discussing loose ends and managing the narrative after Leo's death. They were vague, but ominous. Then a redacted medical report. Leo's name was on it, but the details were obscured. As Vexa, I knew how to unredact. It took time, meticulous effort, but I broke through the digital redaction. The report confirmed Leo had been alive for 10 hours post-accident. 10 hours. But he hadn't been transferred to a better hospital, a specialist facility that might have saved him. The report noted a family decision to keep him at the local under-equipped hospital. My breath hitched. They had let him die. Not directly, maybe, but they had made a choice that sealed his fate. The insurance policy, the negligence at the plant, the refusal to transfer him. It all clicked into place, a horrifying mosaic of betrayal. My rage wasn't morally murky anymore. It was crystal clear. This wasn't just revenge, this was an investigative crusade. And they were going to pay for every single minute of those 10 hours. The rage was a cold, steady fire in my veins. It had been nearly 2 years since Leo's funeral. I was 33 now, older, harder, and infinitely more dangerous than the woman who'd left that chapel with $12. The Honda was long gone, traded for a nondescript SUV parked in the garage of a small rented house miles from the Welch estate. My life was still off the grid, but now it was by design, not necessity. I spent days, then weeks, meticulously planning my next moves. The information I'd uncovered about Logan's financial mismanagement and the horrifying details surrounding Leo's death had transformed my revenge from a personal vendetta into a full-blown mission for justice. Brian, I typed into our encrypted chat. I need to get inside Welch Industries' server. Deep access. Unseen. Brian, 38, didn't ask why. He rarely did anymore. He just sent a series of complex instructions, a digital skeleton key to their corporate network. It's a one-shot deal, Vexer, he warned. Their firewalls are decent. You get in, you get out. No lingering. I spent another week preparing. I simulated the infiltration dozens of times, mapping out every pathway, every potential trap. When I finally made the move, it was late at night, the city silent around me. My fingers danced across the keyboard, a blur of motion and intent. I bypassed their initial defenses, slipped through their secondary firewalls, and burrowed deep into the heart of their system. What I found was worse than I imagined. Logan, 35, hadn't just made a disastrous crypto investment. He'd been siphoning funds from Welch Industries, using the company as his personal piggy bank, funneling money into shell accounts and offshore ventures. The family trust, which he managed, was practically empty. He'd been bleeding the company dry for years, all while maintaining the facade of a shrewd financial mind. I didn't just leak the information, I packaged it. I compiled a comprehensive dossier of evidence, transaction logs, internal memos, manipulated balance sheets. Then I sent it anonymously to the relevant financial regulators, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the state's Attorney General's office. I made sure to include just enough detail to trigger an immediate, undeniable investigation. The fallout was swift and brutal. Within days, news broke. Welch Industries under investigation for financial misconduct. The headlines were everywhere. Logan was being investigated, his assets frozen, his reputation in tatters. Mary's personal bank account, which was tied to some of Logan's illicit transfers, was also frozen. Mary, 62, the woman who had mocked my poverty, was now facing financial ruin herself. Olivia, 34, Logan's wife, was a social climber who thrived on appearances. This public scandal was her worst nightmare. I could almost hear her panic from miles away. And then, the perfect unintended consequence. Olivia, desperate and distraught, called the one person she thought she could trust for a sympathetic ear. Jolie Arnold, 32, my estranged cousin. Olivia didn't know that Jolie, beneath her influencer facade, was a notorious gossip, a human leak who thrived on family drama and often fed anonymous tips to local tabloids and online gossip blogs. Jolie, who had offered me nothing but fake sympathy and then probably dissected my misery with her followers. I didn't have to do anything. Olivia's panicked phone call, full of accusations against Logan, details of their financial woes, and the sheer terror of losing her social standing, was exactly the kind of juicy material Jolie lived for. The scandal spread like wildfire, amplified by Jolie's anonymous posts and carefully curated sources. The Welch family's fall from grace became front-page news, a cautionary tale for the city's elite. Watching it unfold, I felt a strange mix of triumph and unease. My revenge was touching a sharp edge. I was simultaneously thrilled by the precision of my takedown and terrified by what I was becoming. The line between justice and vengeance blurred with every click of my keyboard. Was this what Leo would have wanted? Or was I just a monster, consumed by my own pain? Then another text from Haley, 28, on the burner phone. You're destroying them. Why? I ignored it. My focus was on the next phase. Early the next morning, I saw it. A new post on Jolie's most popular gossip blog. It was a quote attributed to an anonymous source close to the family. They didn't bury Leo, they buried the truth. It was viral before sunrise. My words, delivered through my estranged cousin, echoing across the digital landscape. The truth about Leo's death, the whispers of foul play, were now out there, planted like a seed in the public consciousness. The ground was shifting, and the Welch family was about to be buried under the weight of their own lies. The viral quote, "They didn't bury Leo, they buried the truth," had set the city ablaze. The financial scandal at Welch Industries was now intertwined with whispers of a cover-up surrounding Leo's death. The media, fueled by Jolie's 32 anonymous tips and the sudden interest from regulators, was relentless. It was time for the final act. I had moved back into the Welch house a few days prior. Not as Sarah Smith, the anonymous investor, but as Cameron Rogers, 33, the rightful owner. The house, once a symbol of their power and my humiliation, was now my stage. I'd left it mostly empty, a stark, echoing shell, perfect for what was coming. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the living room setting up a small portable projector. The front door burst open and Mary, 62, stormed in, her face a mask of fury and desperation. Logan, 35, followed, his usual arrogance replaced by a frantic edge. Olivia, 34, hovered behind them, looking utterly bewildered and terrified. Haley, 28, was there too, her eyes darting around the empty space, then landing on me. "Cameron!" Mary shrieked, her voice cracking. "What is the meaning of this? What have you done?" I turned, a calm smile on my face. "Hello, Mary, Logan, Olivia, Haley." My voice was even, devoid of the raw emotion I felt churning inside. "Welcome back to your old home, or rather, my home now." Logan stepped forward, his fists clenched. "You bought this house? You? How? You were broke. You couldn't even pay for Leo's funeral." Yes," I said, walking slowly towards the grand staircase, the very one I'd imagined them descending in their finery. The funeral, a truly memorable day, especially Mary's insightful comment about marrying richer. I looked directly at Mary and Logan's little chuckle. Mary gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. You were there?" "Oh, I was there," I confirmed, reaching the bottom of the stairs. "With precisely $12 in my wallet, the same $12 you all watched me walk away with." I paused, letting the silence hang heavy. "Funny, isn't it? How karma works." "This is insane," Logan roared. "You're ruining us. The company, my reputation, our accounts are frozen." "Your accounts are frozen because you were siphoning funds, Logan," I said, my voice cutting through his bluster. "From Welch Industries, from the family trust. I have the receipts. The regulators have the receipts." His face went pale. Olivia whimpered, clutching Logan's arm. "And Mary," I continued, turning my gaze back to her. "That life insurance policy you took out on Leo, 33, a week before his accident? That was a curious coincidence, wasn't it?" Mary stumbled back, leaning against Logan. "That's a lie. It was a standard policy." "Was it?" I challenged, pulling out my phone. "Because the redacted medical report tells a different story. The one that says Leo was alive for 10 hours after the accident. 10 hours, Mary. and you, as next of kin, refused to transfer him to a specialist hospital. You let him die in that under-equipped facility. Why, Mary? Was it to ensure that standard policy paid out? The air in the room crackled with tension. Mary looked like she'd seen a ghost. Logan stared at me, his eyes wide with dawning horror. Then Haley, 28, stepped forward, her voice small, barely a whisper. She's telling the truth. Everyone turned to her. Mary looked betrayed. Logan looked furious. Haley's eyes, red-rimmed, met mine. I knew. I saw the policy. I saw the emails about the hospital. I wanted to tell you, Cameron, after the funeral, but Logan threatened me. He said he'd cut me off, that I'd be alone. He said no one would believe me anyway. Tears streamed down her face. I'm so sorry, Cam. A wave of unexpected emotion washed over me. Haley, the cynical, spoiled sister, showing genuine remorse. It was a crack in the facade I hadn't anticipated. Just then, my phone buzzed. Brian, 38, a final file. I opened it, my eyes scanning the document. A hidden family inheritance. Left by Leo's great aunt years ago, but never claimed. It had been siphoned by Logan, buried in obscure accounts, just like everything else. And now, thanks to Brian's relentless digging, it was uncovered. And I, as Leo's legal widow, was the sole beneficiary. Not Mary, not Logan, not Haley, me. The power dynamic had flipped completely. I wasn't just the owner of their former home. I was the inheritor of their hidden wealth, the keeper of their darkest secrets. I looked at Mary, her face ashen, at Logan, defeated, at Olivia, terrified, and at Haley, finally broken by the truth. Don't worry, I said, my voice calm, almost gentle, as I pulled a key card from my pocket. It was for a motel room, a cheap one, just a few blocks away. I walked over to Mary and pressed it into her trembling hand. It's paid for 2 nights. After that, I'm sure you can ask someone with more than $12. I watched as the realization dawned on her face. The $12, the ultimate insult, returned with devastating precision. The silence in the room was deafening, filled only by Olivia's quiet sobs and Haley's ragged breathing. My vengeance was complete, bold, unwavering, and utterly, chillingly cold. The silence in the grand, empty house was deafening after they left. Mary, 62, had snatched the motel key, her face a mask of utter defeat and fury. Logan, 35, had dragged Olivia, 34, out, muttering threats I knew he couldn't follow through on. Haley, 28, had lingered for a moment, her eyes still red, a silent plea in them, before she too turned and walked out. The air still hummed with the echoes of shattered lives, but it was their lives, not mine. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, though I mostly remained in the background. The financial regulators, armed with the evidence I'd provided as vexor, moved swiftly against Logan. Welch Industries was in freefall. The media, still buzzing from Jolie's 32 viral quote, dug deeper into Leo's 33 accident, connecting the dots between Logan's budget cuts, the ignored safety protocols, and the suspicious life insurance policy Mary had taken out. There was no direct evidence to charge them with murder, but the public narrative, fueled by the leaked reports and the sheer weight of their financial crimes, was damning enough. Their reputations, their social standing, their entire world crumbled. The family payout hearing for Leo's estate was a formality. I didn't attend. I didn't need to see their faces again, not in a courtroom. Brian, 38, handled everything, representing my interests through the Shell Corporation. When the dust settled, I was granted custody of Leo's name, his intellectual property, and surprisingly, the rights to a small tech prototype he'd been tinkering with in his spare time, a smart home security system he'd envisioned. He'd never told me about the inheritance, but Brian's meticulous work had found it, buried deep in Logan's fraudulent accounts. It was a substantial sum, enough to ensure I'd never again have to count $12 in my pocket. A few months later, I found myself standing before Leo's grave. The plain pine casket was long buried, replaced by a simple, unadorned headstone. The lilies were gone, replaced by wild grass. I wasn't there out of guilt, not anymore. The revenge had brought justice, a cold, precise retribution. But it hadn't healed the hole Leo left behind. It had merely filled it with something else, a grim satisfaction, a sense of balance restored. I missed him. I always would. But the suffocating shame, the desperate fear of being broke and alone, that was gone. The Welch house, my house now, was no longer an empty shell. It was a work in progress, a buzzing hub of activity. I hadn't wanted to live in it. It held too many ghosts, too many bitter memories. Instead, I had transformed it. With the inheritance and the steady income from Vexa, I established a nonprofit. The colonial estate, once a symbol of elitism and cruelty, was now a shelter for young women from disadvantaged backgrounds, a place where they could learn tech trades, digital repair, coding, cybersecurity, the very skills that had saved me. I taught some of the classes myself, not as Cameron Rogers, but as a mentor, a guide. The irony wasn't lost on me. The house that had seen my lowest point was now fostering the future of others. Vexa still existed, a phantom in the digital underworld, taking on the jobs that needed untraceable expertise. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the challenge, about proving that knowledge was power, and that power could be wielded for good or for precise, calculated consequence. One quiet evening, sitting in the small office I'd set up in the house, I logged onto the same obscure message board where Vexa was born. I typed out a final message, not a job offer, not a solution, but a statement, cryptic, free, and utterly mine. The digital bones always tell a story. You just have to know how to listen. And sometimes the loudest truths are whispered by the quietest hands. I hit enter. It went viral before sunrise, shared and dissected by the anonymous community that had once feared and respected Vexa. They didn't know it was me, Cameron Rogers, the widow who had been left with nothing. But they knew the message. They understood the power of the unseen, the untraceable. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the sprawling, manicured lawn of the house that had once belonged to the Welches. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The house stood solid, no longer a monument to their pride, but a testament to my resilience. Funny how karma always costs exactly what you stole from someone else, sometimes down to the dollar.